The Secure in Mind podcast series is an educational initiative of the Cybersecurity Advisors Network, or CIAN. CIAN is an international not-for-profit trust network of experts in technology, policy, ethics, and good practice. Our mission is to strengthen society's safety, resilience, and ability to fight against cybercrime and similar threats. Visit us at cybersecurityadvisors.network. Good afternoon, and welcome to the latest in the Cybersecurity Advisors Network's Secure in Mind series of video recordings and audio podcasts. This is a service that we provide, consisting of conversations with interesting people in and across the information security space and related disciplines. Anybody with anything interesting and relevant to say, and we try to keep these conversations light and informal. And today I'm joined by Dmytro Bilash. I'm looking at my profile here, my notes. He's co-founder and chief business development officer of Ozavul. I'm going to ask Dmytro to talk a little bit about himself and his company. As a bit of background, we met at a conference in Poland this summer. Dmytro was giving a presentation at a startup competition that I helped to judge, and we started talking a little bit about the topic that we're going to discuss today, specifically disinformation, and we met up by chance again at the airport on the way out, and I think had a great chat, really clicked, and we've kept in touch ever since. And so I'd like to give Dmytro a spot to talk, like I said, talk about yourself, who you are, talk about your company, where you come from, and what your focus and expertise is.
Hi, John. Thank you for inviting me for this talk, and happy to be here. So maybe I'll start about my personal background. I'm in software development and in tech entrepreneurship for I think 13 or 15 years, something like that, quite a while. And the vast majority of my career, I work with 10 years ago was called data science and machine learning, and right now, we call it AI, right? So, my expertise, through the whole this time is kind of on intersection between analyzing the data and applying, machine learning and AI techniques to make it more efficient. I was running a startup, in AI field that was acquired in 2019. After that, I was, working for a corporate sector and running AI Excellence Center and developing still a lot of cool AI stuff for big corporate guys. And then, important fact, I'm Ukrainian. So when Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, myself, my friends, team, partners, we wanted somehow to help our country. And we just started asking people in the government, in the civil society, how we can help. Guys, you are in the army, in the security sphere, you're doing an important job now. How we can contribute to our cause. And we landed on a problem of disinformation, because obviously drones, rockets, rifles, tanks, all this stuff is extremely important, and this is something that actually make a difference in a battlefield. But at the end of the day, what you want to achieve, you want your enemy to stop thinking about that they can attack you, to drop the idea that they can win this war. And on top of all this, kinetic level, naval, air, traditional cyber level, there is one more layer, informational layer, cognitive layer, which impacts our perception of the world and at the end of the decisions that we make. It's extremely important domain with a huge added value. You don't need that much people to fight there, to protect it, but it brings a lot of impact. Externally, affecting your enemy or your allies, and internally protecting your own information and cognitive security. So we landed on this problem and started developing step-by-step different features that was used by government and companies and so on to make the protection from such information threats better. And in 2023, we found ourselves in a position where we have not just small features, but the whole platform kind of operational system, which allows analysts, professionals in this field on a public service or in a private companies to reveal threats, analyze them, and design response for this. And that's basically what we're doing. We're helping good people in great organizations to protect themselves from a new emerging type of information threats.
Thank you. So what I'd like to do is to very gently ease into this topic with a little bit of background as well. Now we remember the dawn of what we would consider information warfare or information-borne warfare, probably in about 2007 with the Russian cyber attacks on Estonian critical infrastructure. And when the American presidential elections rolled around in 2016, we saw a massive rise in the spread and quantity and sometimes even quality of both misinformation and disinformation. And of course, with COVID and subsequent geopolitical developments, that has increased. Just to clarify, misinformation is just wrong information. Disinformation is targeted, is intentional wrong information. And obviously one can turn into the other. And none of this is anything new. Propaganda is nothing new. Trying to spread lies is nothing new. But I think the combination of social media as a channel and as a way to gain asymmetric returns on investments, so with very little investment, you can actually have large returns, have allowed this to become a huge phenomenon. So maybe let's talk about, where we are today. What do you see as some of the big threats from various types of information? I know we love to beat up on the Russians. It's fun, but it's not only the Russians. We have this from Chinese actors. We have this from Iranian actors and sometimes from Western countries as well. Where do you see the major kind of the touch points where this becomes a challenge for society today?
Mm-hmm. I think you framed this problem and the current context is very well. So essentially we are in the middle of a perfect storm because propaganda is nothing new. It's with us for thousands of years. But in 2016, when there was first big elections in the States, when the social networks became a standard, back 2012, 2008, if you remember this time, those who look this, all this social media, all this internet stuff was a bit nerdy. It was experiment. Obama started first experiments in 2008, and went in 2012. There was some success in some of the nations sent via online through email, social media. It was kind of a still nerdy but revolution. In 2016. The usage of social media to disseminate information, to affect the perception of huge masses of people became a norm. So this was the first kind of moment when Western society, at least, realized the danger of disinformation multiplied by the power of dissemination of social media. And from that point of time, it was progressing. Up to 2020, when the COVID happened, right? And when we saw that not only brings some kind of political things and it's games between politicians once per 4 or 5 years, but it results in a real deaths, wrong information about vaccination and so on, result in huge losses on stock markets and the businesses and the most important losses of lives. So I think from that point of time, governments started, treating this problem on a whole another level. But at the same time, I think that the appearance of generative AI and the progress that we see right now with large language models changed the game again. So now we're in a perfect storm, but on the one hand, you can disseminate content really fast. All these threats happened from 2016 until 2020, 2021 is still here. But beside that, you can also produce content really fast and really cheap with a high quality in all languages. Previously, when you want to run a campaign in few countries, you need to hire people who can write this content, who understand this, who can translate, comment, and so on. Now, you don't need this. You can produce content almost for free from OpenAI. And it can be almost any content. There is very limited safety nets. So you can run these conversations worldwide with a very small resources. And this generative AI capabilities to create content fast and social media capabilities to disseminate fast creates the perfect storm. Frankly saying, I don't see a huge opportunities to make it extremely better anytime soon.
I want to get into the Gen AI side of things in a little bit, because I had a really interesting conversation with a researcher at the Swiss Federal Polytechnic Institute at Zurich a couple of weeks ago on precisely this topic, and he made some very interesting points about where he sees this as going and what potential protective mechanisms, defensive mechanisms are. One interesting point that I really like to refer to is the former director of the American CIA, a guy named Michael J. Hayden, had an observation. I don't know if he came up with it, is that you cannot create divisions in society, but you can exploit them and make this worse. Now, you mentioned disinformation as a weapon of war, and I think arguably the concept of warfare needs a revisiting, because we think of it as a very binary, either things are exploding or things are not exploding. And I've in the past made the argument that, by any definition, with the rise of information and communications technology, the evolution of social media, the digitalization of elections, we are in an ongoing adversarial relationship. When I say we, Western liberal democracies, call it, or stable societies, call it what you will, whether you want to call that war or not is another thing. And one of the things that we've seen very often is the disruption and exploitation of societal divisions, whether it's Brexit, the American right-left divide. I live in Spain, Catalan separatism, the German far right. Where do you, obviously, being Ukrainian, me having my sympathies obvious, there is the topic of aid to Ukraine in the face of the Russian invasion, right? And obviously there is an interest by the Russians to disrupt political support for increased aid. But beyond that, even, where do you see some of the major trends currently in quote unquote peacetime destabilization of Western democratic processes and disruption and destruction of trust, for example, in institutions and politics, coming from this kind of disinformation?
You mean, what are the key target lines of divisions that can be attacked? I mean, this, right?
Yeah. What are some, if I'm an adversary, if I'm a bad guy and I see myself as fighting, quote unquote, the West, right? And I hope
and if you are Uber fighter against West, probably
I'm a Bond villain. What am I hitting with my
real villain? Okay, so if you're a real villain, I think first of all, you will pick on the one hand very popular topics. So obviously it's Ukraine-Russia war, and you will try to exploit this to I want to point out here, because I'm obviously really deep into this problem. The goal of the real villain in this case is not to create a division between Western society, at least not now, because Russia cannot win on the battlefield. But what they can do, they can theoretically win on a Capitol Hill, because if there is no supplies, not enough money, Ukraine as a smaller economy cannot stand against 1/5 of the whole continent, right? Which is Russia right now, at least. So obviously you will first try to decrease the support and create the situation on a battlefield that will be favorable for you. And then if Russia succeeds, then you will exploit this as a huge division of society, because it will be a huge loss and a huge sign of inefficiency for Western democracy, and there will be a desire to blame who should be blamed for this catastrophe. So then you will try to create a division. What is the most typical example right now? It's Palestine and Israel. It's a huge thing, and it's evolving. Maybe some of you that use TikTok saw the popularity of Osama bin Laden that is growing, and his letter from 2000s when he explains completely anti-Semitic paradigm and why it happened. And people started.
If you've not, TikTok has fortunately taken down most of the videos. I will link to a really good episode of the Crooked Media Offline podcast that discusses this. It is a mind-blowing level of stupidity, and what Dmytro, what you're referring to. So just in case somebody is not as connected as you are and is wondering what the hell we're talking about, it's worth knowing about, but don't bother looking for the videos. It's really dumb.
So, I would say that, first of all, I would try to pick big topics and try to amplify voices that are kind of more right-wing or left-wing in a certain way, right? And on the other hand, I would try to decrease the voices of more central people who are more balanced and more responsible for what they're saying. And this is the second thing what I would do. I would exploit divisions on a much smaller scale, because it's very easy to notice when something happens with Osama bin Laden or with Palestine, because people started talking this in mass. But if something happens in your own state, in your own county, in your own city, and a villain can exploit this division, this opportunity at scale, this is very dangerous. Because there is no central government, no secret agency who will monitor this in your 1 million or 500,000 town or something. But it will still create divisions in society. And this is very dangerous, I think. So in my perspective, threats on a global level, on the whole society level that are big, is not that challenging as the threats on a smaller scale. And you need to pay attention to both.
And I think that goes in the topic of exactly that dramatic return on investment. It's essentially a form of asymmetric warfare, whereas running disinformation campaigns manually, like we've seen from for example, the Internet Research Agency, what is it, the Trolls from Elgino, requires a lot of effort, right? Requires people in front of PC, whereas doing this with automated systems is pretty easy. You also spoke about threats to elections in our pre-recording chat. So what are some of, I think, the big things to be concerned about, to keep an eye on in the coming year or two, let's say beyond the American presidential election, because we know that's going to be a big one.
Yeah. So in 2024, I think around, if I'm not mistaken, 2 billion people are going to come to elections. So it's one of the biggest election cycles right now on the planet. And I think that, first of all, each candidate and each party should be prepared to defend themselves. And I'm talking to some people, and I found out that a lot of people are more concerned about attacking than protecting. And this is important, to have a balance between offensive things that you do, obviously, to win the position, but also protective things to protect yourself. Because even if you win, the story only starts, right? And all the baggage that you grab with yourself after this campaign will go further. So if there is any threat, you tackle this in advance. So I think that in terms of elections, each candidate needs to build its own anti-disinformation capabilities, effective threat intelligence, and definitely apply AI to this. Otherwise, it's almost impossible to, track and measure and analyze that huge volume of content.
So I think this is a very good segue precisely into that AI topic that you touched on earlier and just now. There's a couple of really disingenuous but highly effective techniques. If you're not familiar with the Gish Gallop, for example, that an aggressor, a disinformation actor, can use to very, very quickly and asymmetrically sow discord, to sow distrust. And even somebody who is very well-intentioned and tries to correct these wrong messages and tries to track actors, like a lot of very good groups are doing online right now. I'll link to a few of them. There's always, again, this asymmetry of investment required to run a disinformation campaign versus defending, as you say, messages and stability. And I think, enter AI. It's obviously the big business and tech buzzword of the year. What are some of the big threats and opportunities that you see, from AI? What do you see disinformation actors using this for, whether it's intelligent automation, decision making, or Gen AI for content creation? And how can we maybe harness some of this to defend against this stuff?
Yeah, so Gen AI for content creation is already here. So we made research and we see that hostile groups already use generative AI precisely. I think at point of time when we saw this, it was OpenAI that they used to create comments and like automatically create a conversation. And I think it can go beyond and become even more dangerous, because at the point of time when it's in the social media, we at least can see this, and social media can block it. But imagine a moment of time when you find a girl on Tinder or a boy on Tinder, start conversation, you're doing a conversation, and you're just becoming friends you never met, because it just didn't happen occasionally. But then at some point of time, this person shifts you in a certain political bias. And it's not and then it can be not a person, it can be fully automated process of AI that communicates with you and simulates you. So this radicalization agents that communicate one-to-one with a person, this is the future of threats, and it's extremely dangerous because it's almost impossible to track it. And all technologies are almost here. It's just a matter of applying them and using in real life scenario. So I think this is the most dangerous scenario. And frankly saying, I long term, we can apply many technologies to try to counter these threats. We also will apply AI to reveal disinformation threats and provide decision makers with the proper intelligence about this. But at the end of the day, this is a real people who are making a decision whether to believe this or not. And the best thing you can do is education. It's I don't like this wording and this statement, because it sounds to me very boring and inefficient and so on. But at the end of the day, this is how it works. And I think it actually brings results. I'll give you one example. When the invasion just started, Russians tried to apply from the very first day some deep fakes, and they were really poor. The quality was really shitty. But now they progressed, so they know how to apply voice cloning technologies. They apply face swap and so on. Especially it's funny because the vast majority of the best companies in the world doing this are Ukrainian companies, and they look on them how they do this. But still, so they can easily create any of us using just this video and the voice that they have here, and produce myself sitting and saying any kind of thing that they want in the video. And it's happening almost every day in Ukrainian ecosystem in information part. And people don't believe this, because they are educated that if you hear something non-consistent from a president or officials, you should verify this. Or if you hear something extremely extreme, just go and hang yourself, or we are going to have today 1,000 rockets on Kiev. So if you hear something like that, you need to verify it from a couple of sources. It's called education, when people become more critical. So I think that together with the technology advancement and intelligence and all important things, we also need to educate population to kind of create this antidote against such threats.
So I'll link in the comments to a couple of initiatives. Particularly, I believe there's a very interesting Finnish initiative on educating students at an early age to be critical of especially social media messaging. And there's a lot of effort on the EU side as well. It just concerns me. I understand the need for a multidisciplinary defensive approach, which includes your average citizen being educated, being critical, being informed. It just concerns me we're playing catch up technologically, essentially, to the bad actors. And I think right now there's my fear is that too much emphasis is being placed on individuals, media consumers' willingness to educate themselves, willingness to take the time, especially in an age when people don't buy newspapers anymore. People like to have a 24-hour news cycle. They want to be kind of drip fed individual bits of media and information. People get news from TikTok, right? Which is just, for an old guy, is mind blowing. So, when it comes to actually, given that we have to do this, right? We have to educate people. We have to try. We have to correct the disinformation. when I had my fireside chat with a guy named Egor Zakharov in Budapest about Gen AI and countermeasures, he felt that you could use neural networks to detect, for example, Gen AI deepfakes, as well as to detect patterns and trends in disinformation actors, that this would be effective up to a certain point, maybe in a couple of years, after which it becomes impossible even for intelligent mechanisms to detect deepfakes. First of all, do you think he's right? And second of all, okay. So given the difficulty of educating, given the fact that education alone is not enough, once Gen AI deepfake becomes good enough to evade detection, what do we do then?
So first of all, you can look when you detect something on two aspects. One is the content, another is behavior, right? So content, as you mentioned, we're going to have a point of time when it will be like so human-like that it will be almost impossible to identify that it was produced by a machine. That's why we as a company, for example, don't invest in this, because we think that it's a matter of a few years when it happened. But we can look on a behavior. So you can look how many actors are coordinated. You can look how they coordinate their efforts through the time. So at the end of the day, you're going to have a signals showing you that like there is some coordination. And if you see on the content side as well, that the same coordinated actors share regularly the same hostile messages, you can come up with a certain solution. So this is the first thing. And the second thing, I believe that we also need a proper legal law enforcement tools. The same as in cybersecurity. Like, I believe in maybe 20, 25 years ago, stealing somebody's password was not a crime, or was like not that much crime. Now, you have much stronger regulations of doing this, which result in at least potential tools to do something with actors that take part in these activities. Disinformation and like counter disinformation sphere right now at the point of time like cyber security 20 years ago. We can identify bad actors, but we don't have that much tools to do, because if you want to block them, if you want to punish them, you need to have a legal tools to do this. And I think in EU, the regulation environment is going towards making those who take regular disinformation efforts accountable for this. I think it's the same thing is kind of happening in States, but we are not at that point of time yet when we have all the tools. Hopefully it will be in relatively distant future.
And that's a really interesting point, because I mean, if you go on an American social media forum, a Reddit, and talk about things like holding media accountable for truth, right? The Americans got rid of their fairness doctrine 40 years ago, I think it was, versus, for example, in my home country, in Switzerland or in Germany, you cannot print certain things as a newspaper. You're held accountable. The UK is somewhere in the middle. And I think it's really interesting that you mentioned this accountability of the channels, but maybe also the people who will amplify, maybe unwittingly turning disinformation into misinformation. Because I mean, sure, you can try to prosecute a Chinese or a Russian troll, but good luck with that, right? Especially if they're state affiliated.
Yeah, but you have tools. You can at least come to Facebook or to Google or any other big company or to TikTok that operate in a legal framework of the Western world as well, and say, guys, look, here's 100 accounts. They do this, and this, and they should be punished. Now, if any kind of researcher or institution comes to these companies, the decision is just a goodwill of these private organizations, which is not right. Like, because if there is a crime, there should be a punishment for this, right? At least like in a way to delete these accounts, right? So the same happens with the domains. If somebody registered a fake website that steals money, right? And you cannot find the person who steals this money because it's a good operation done behind it. But you can still have legal tools to come and domain register and say, shut down these guys. So the same thing more or less should happen in our industry, to provide with more tools to create real actions and relatively fast.
I'm grateful that you mentioned Facebook, actually, because I mean, I fully agree with you on the regulatory need to catch up. Because, as you say, we embarked on essentially the internet without having a framework of rules to deal with it. The same goes for social media. We just hadn't figured out not only the rules, but also the societal norms for how to deal with anonymity online, and this ability for every single person to have a megaphone to everybody else. So I'm going to link to a piece that John Oliver did a couple of years ago on Facebook and disinformation affecting, Rohingya minority in Myanmar, which arguably were Buddhist extremists were calling for extermination. And there was this conflict about what should Facebook be doing, what can't Facebook do, and realistically, what are they doing? One major point that Egor, so my counterpart in Budapest, made about AI was, I touched earlier on this idea that disinformation is a very, very resource intensive activity. Whereas his point was that AI will become more commoditized and will allow a much broader range of actors to access this kind of capability to cause havoc, essentially. Now, there is the issue that AI costs a lot of power. It costs a lot of, water. It's the same thing that we have with data centers, right? Crypto mining. Will individual actors still be able to use that capability? But let's assume that they can't. Let's assume that neighborhood group X has access to Gen AI content creation, but also intelligent dissemination and campaign management tools. Yeah. You mentioned, for example, private sector usage. I have some thoughts about what could they do? Where could they abuse this capability? What could they manipulate? Can you give some thoughts on that?
Yeah, first of all, what you said, there is a group in your neighborhood. They already have all the tools. And it's going to be even cheaper and better in the future. So we're not going to be at the point of time when it's going to become more and more expensive. It's not true. It's going to other direction. It's becoming more and more affordable, meaning that any group, one person can run an information operation, if this person wants. There is no need for the team, right? The private use case, I think the most money driven is stock trading. You can pick a company and try to create a hazard around their reputation. At least short term, you need to do it, have it for long term. But this short term will be enough for you to drop a stock price for a certain percentage and earn money on this. So this is the most kind of straightforward example how you can apply information operations to make money and do harm to your competitors.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because that's exactly the scenario that I was thinking of. It's basically market manipulation, but also, you mentioned neighborhood, local politics. I mean, you don't need to necessarily go after a whole political party because it's against your geopolitical interests. You could theoretically go after a local politician that opposes you for your community council or whatever. So you could defame your neighbor because, you don't like the way he paved his driveway. So I think that's a really kind of a scary, approach. Now we're coming up on time. And before we wrap up, I want to close this up on a hopefully optimistic note. So given all the doom and gloom and the challenges, tell us a good thing that we can expect. What gives us hope in this challenging time?
I still that at the end of the day, we as a humankind and creativity of open, market-driven society will always solve problems. I cannot name any problem that wasn't solved, or at least we didn't make a proper step to solve it, right? You pick any sphere, from flights to space, to energy, to medicine, and to healthcare, and so on. The same will happen here, I believe. So there is obviously attackers in a more favorable position, as with any cyber stuff, because you make the first turn, right? But I believe that we are capable of finding a proper mechanism. And from my perspective, it will be a combination between education, technologies, intelligence, and regulations. And in a proper way mixed, all these components can bring us to a solution when information threats will still be a challenge, but not that major as it's now.
I appreciate that. I like to have the same level of optimism about human ingenuity and creativity, and I like to think that we can solve this one. I think right now it may seem overwhelming, and with technological developments, it may seem even more intimidating. You know, my father is in his 80s, and he told me recently, you know, I don't know what to believe anymore. And I am really, really hopeful that we can solve this problem using a mix of technology, laws, evolving social norms, and just generally awareness of what challenges we face and how we can fix them. So with that said, I want to wrap up and thank you very much kindly for your time, your expertise. I will link to Dmytro's profile, his company, and a whole lot of notes that I've taken and links to some informative resources. I encourage you to look up Dmytro. He's a great public speaker. He's a nice guy, very, very knowledgeable. I hope you'll also look up the Cybersecurity Advisors Networks, check out our other podcasts and videos, and I wish you all a very, very safe and successful rest of the day. Dmytro, thanks a lot. You're a champ, and hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for joining us in this latest edition of the Secure in Mind podcast series, courtesy of the Cybersecurity Advisors Network. Visit us at cybersecurityadvisors.network/media and /blog for additional episodes and articles. Follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, SoundCloud, Podcast Republic, and iTunes, and don't hesitate to get in touch. Stay safe, stay smart, stay educated, and stay secure.